Welcome to Military Matters, Money Matters. My name is Anna Berman, and I am the chair of the Military Matters Committee and an attorney and partner at Kutak Rock LLP. Launched in 2016, Military Matters is a program that fills the gap in legal services available to service members and veterans. Our pro bono volunteer attorneys accept referrals to assist service members and veterans with their legal needs for free or for a reduced cost. To download our toolkit on foreclosure prevention, to find out about upcoming events, or to donate to our program, please visit our website at militarymatterskc.org. This series was developed to address common needs within the veteran and service member communities. Our hope is that you find our videos compelling, interesting, and educational in an effort to help you build better credit, to follow a budget, and to learn how to be consistently financially stable. Our goal is to provide you, our veterans and service members, with tools to prevent home foreclosure and to map out your financial future. As one of our presenters, Joanne Stutz, has stated, as a bankruptcy attorney, I see the effects of not having any financial education. With just a little help and common sense, some of the mistakes that lead to bankruptcy could be avoided. We hope you find this series helpful so that you can maintain or regain control of your finances and your future. Military Matters volunteer attorney Rachel Foley of Foley Law KC Bankruptcy will share with us different bankruptcy and credit mythbusters. Rachel began her bankruptcy career with the United Auto Workers, representing GM and Ford employees in Chapter 13 bankruptcies and Chapter 7 bankruptcies. Rachel was the only bankruptcy attorney for the Missouri Auto Workers, and it was not unusual for her to manage 3 to 4 times the regular attorney caseload at any given time. In addition to her training through the UAW, Rachel's background as a risk manager and 20 years' experience in the emergency room as a registered respiratory therapist makes her uniquely qualified to argue a variety of cases. Rachel has been named to the Pro Bono Wall of Fame by the Missouri Bar.
Myth 1, I am a loser. I hear constantly, I am a loser, I have failed, I'm the dumbest or the worst person on the face of the earth. This is simply not true. I will tell you, I've been filing bankruptcy cases since about 1998, and I can count maybe on one hand people that knew what they were doing and purposely ran up debt without any intent to pay it back. 9 times out of 10, people are in my office because something happened in their life beyond their control. Something happened without anything that individual could have done to prevent it, such as job loss, health, divorce, COVID, any number of factors that could have put them into bankruptcy. And so I shared with them a passage that somebody shared with me early on when I considered becoming a bankruptcy attorney. Deuteronomy 15:1 and 2. It is the year of Jubilee, and all debt shall be forgiven at the end of the 7th year. So if God would not hold your debt over your head, then neither should you. You must forgive yourself for being in debt and seek assistance. You did not want to be in bankruptcy. I am like the dentist, and if people come to me and they're excited about it, that throws a red flag on the play. Bottom line is, you need to forgive yourself. Myth 2, both spouses must file for bankruptcy relief. I'm married, so both my spouse and I must file. Wrong. There are several cases where throughout my career where I've only placed one spouse into bankruptcy. There's no need to put a spouse into bankruptcy if they're not on the accounts and their credit is under control. This allows one spouse to be bankruptcy-free and to be a resource should they need to purchase a home or vehicle. Myth 3, if my spouse files and I do not, my spouse will ruin my credit. If one spouse files and the other one doesn't, bankruptcy will be reported on the spouse who filed bankruptcy, but not on the spouse who did not. And the bankruptcy will report for 10 years. However, your credit should not show their bankruptcy filing on your report. Now, if the mortgage is in the spouse's bankruptcy and you are also on that account, you may show that it's handled in bankruptcy. But if the payments are on time, the report should reflect those payments accordingly. Another scenario is if you have to go to obtain credit down the road and you and your spouse go to purchase a new house together. You both apply, but the interest rate comes back higher than you want to pay. That may affect your ability until the spouse has the ability to revamp their credit score and bring it back to life. You may end up having to file on your own. Myth 4, I will never have credit again. Oh my goodness, this is such a joke because my clients will call me and say, hey, I know we just filed bankruptcy, but Capital One has offered me a card. Why are they offering me a line of credit or credit card right after I have filed? The answer is simple. You have just reduced your debt-to-income ratio, meaning that you wiped out your debt, so your income is available to pay for other things. As your debt-to-income ratio reduces your credit worthiness, it can rebound after you file bankruptcy. Creditors are going to see you as a great credit risk because you can't file bankruptcy again for 8 years, or so they think. So they're going to float you a card straight away and say, hey, come with us. It may be a 27% interest rate, but they will have no problem offering you a card or a line of credit. Many factors go into a creditor's decision to lend. Income, debt-to-income ratio, your age, your length of employment, equity in an item that you were purchasing. I had a client walk out of a Chapter 7 bankruptcy, and 30 days after discharge, he went out and bought an F-150 truck at $60,000 and 0% interest through Ford Motor Credit. They knew he filed bankruptcy because I instructed him to make sure to say you have filed bankruptcy. Plus, your bankruptcy will come up on your credit report. He told them that they offered him 0% interest because of the equity in the vehicle. And they figured he's going to default early on, and so they would just repossess the vehicle and resell it at a future position. You can obtain credit during a Chapter 13, and you can obtain credit after either chapter of filing for bankruptcy. Can you buy a house after bankruptcy? Yes, you can, but it will depend on the lender and the money you make and the equity in the house. So if you're making $100,000 a year, but your credit score is not as good, and you don't have other debts that are weighing you down, you may be offered a lower interest rate. But if you're buying a $100,000 house and you make $20,000 to $30,000 a year and your credit score is bad, your interest rate may be higher, or they may just flat out deny you the right to a loan. So you have to look at your credit score and look to rebuild it. Myth 5, my credit score will never rise above 600 after bankruptcy. Generally, bankruptcy will drop your credit score between 50 to 100 points, if not more, depending on where you were at the start of the bankruptcy when you filed. But what they don't tell you is your FICO score is a breathing entity, and it continues to grow and change, and there's a lot of factors that go into that. Yes, your credit score can change after you file bankruptcy. You make that change through rebuilding your credit once a discharge is obtained. But if you're at that point where you're considering a bankruptcy, really the last thing you should be considering is your FICO score. Why? Because you're falling behind on your payments. And falling behind on your payments is being reported to the credit bureau, which means your credit score is going down and it's beginning to tank. Late pays are a wound to your credit score, and each month the Band-Aid gets ripped off as they report another late payment, and that financial wound, it gets a little deeper. Bankruptcy cauterizes or seals the credit score wound, so it can begin to heal itself almost immediately. I stress with my clients, if they're going to do a Chapter 13, make those payments on time each and every month. Because by making monthly payments on time, it is a trade line for some lenders. And they'll look at it, the payment history, and say, by golly, that person has made every payment in a timely manner, and they're on the road to financial rehab.
Military Matters volunteer attorney Joanne Stutz will now prepare you for how to create and follow a budget. Joanne is a former law clerk for the bankruptcy judge for the Western District of Missouri and a current board member of the Kansas City Bankruptcy Bar Association. Oftentimes, people think budgeting is time-consuming, complicated, takes too much effort, and is meant for people who are great at math. It turns out it is far more simple and less scary than that. Joanne will walk you through how to easily create a budget and follow it.
For almost 40 years, I have represented people who have one primary thing in common. They are all being hounded by creditors who want to be paid, and the creditors are hounding people who lack money to pay them. Now, why these people cannot pay their bills varies. Maybe they lost a job. They have medical problems, and the bills that accompany those problems. They have student loans. Perhaps they are just spending beyond their means. What I try to do is offer these people a way to resolve the current problem and avoid some of the factors that created it so the hounding creditors do not return. Now, sometimes the problems are caused because spending is out of control, because there has been no budget, no way to track how the money that they were receiving was being spent. Quite often, when people start looking at their expenses, they are surprised to see where their money is going. I had one person tell me that when he started having to write down all of his expenses, he realized that he was spending a whole lot of money at Quick Trip every day, and all those stops add up. This was money that he didn't have and didn't need to spend. I hope to help you understand why you should have a budget, what a budget is, and how you create one that suits you. So how does a budget help you? A budget will help you develop good financial habits, which can relieve some of the emotional stress and ultimately help you achieve your financial goals. A budget is just your plan for managing your money to meet your needs and goals. But for a budget to be effective, you must know your goals. Evaluate your monthly income and expenses regularly and be flexible. This is not a one-size-fits-all. The format is pretty simple, but how you follow and live within it is entirely up to you. Now, if you don't like the word budget, and some people don't, call it effective money management or anything else. Track your income and your expenses and start to live within the boundaries created by them. But how do you create a budget? It begins with a plan for how you will track your spending, adjust to changes in income and spending, and both reach your goals and strengthen your spending self-control. Simply put, a budget is your list of what money you receive every month balanced against the money that you spend. Now let's create your monthly budget. Hopefully you have a pad of paper handy or maybe even a computer with Excel open. Draw a few lines down the middle to create 4 columns. In the first column, list all sources of income. In the second column, how much you received. If your income arrives more than once a month, list each time you are paid. In the third column, write down your regular monthly expenses, and in the fourth column, how much you pay. In the third and fourth columns, you should also include the amount you spend each month on you, fun and games. If you have access to Excel and know how to use that program, that would work too. Now start tracking your income and expenses by simply writing down every time you receive money and every time you spend money. Write down the date, the amount, what was purchased or paid, and if appropriate, where. Then review this at the end of each month and identify your weaknesses. We all have them. Your budget needs to balance so expenses equal or are less than income. For example, how many trips do you make to the grocery store? Do you purchase from a list or just wander the aisles and grab what looks appealing? Having a list and sticking to it is a great way to avoid impulse purchases. How often are you eating out and where? Include Quick Trip and fast food places. How much do you spend each time? Clothing. How often do you buy on impulse rather than because you need the item? Entertainment, fun and games, movies, liquor, eating out sometimes. Pay-per-view TV, HBO. Do you watch it, all those channels, or have it because it has become a habit? Subscriptions, magazines, newspapers, online sources that are not free, and general stuff. This is for the things that do not fit really into a category. Cigarettes, alcohol. I just want you to identify where you may spend your money. After a month or two of this, you will find yourself mentally checking your spending, which leads to saving some instead of spending all. Now, I know this appears daunting and way too much work. I have been doing this in one form or another since I was a child. My father made me and my sisters keep track of our money from a young age. We had ledger books, and we had to write down where our money came from, allowances and babysitting primarily, and then how we spent it. I believe Dad discussed with us expenditures that he thought were not necessary. I did not realize how ingrained those lessons were until I was on my own, because I have never stopped. I hope that some of what I have offered today can help you get started. If you can keep track of your money and know where you need to spend it, you can also know how much you can spend on splurges, because you should not have to live without some fun and frivolity. Budgeting just helps you save so you can splurge on occasion.
Military Matters volunteer attorney Rachel Foley of Foley Law KC Bankruptcy will share with us a presentation about apps and technology to better your credit. Rachel is a bankruptcy attorney who is licensed in both Missouri and Kansas and helps debtors eliminate debt, stop garnishments, repossessions, and foreclosures. Technology is always changing and progressing. We are excited to share with you how to utilize that technology to benefit your financial future.
Today, I'm going to talk to you about apps or applications to use to better monitor your credit. We want to use technology to make our lives easier. You cannot evaluate and seek to improve your financial life if you have no clue what's affecting your FICO score. How many lines of credit do you have? What are the balances on those loans of credit? How many late pays do you have? These are things, when taken together, determine your credit score. Some applications are free, and free is great as long as it does the job that you want it to do. There are 3 credit bureaus that will produce a credit report about you: Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. Each credit bureau reports a little differently, and they may report some creditors while the other bureaus do not. Experian Credit Monitoring allows you to sign up for their free monitoring service. TransUnion is another credit bureau that allows you to produce a credit report for free. Pull those reports and you may review them as a starting point to see who is reporting and what are they reporting about your credit. Credit Karma. Credit Karma is an app with an online service that you can sign up for free. I have many of my clients using this service. The reporting shows what is affecting your score and what you can do to increase your FICO score. Credit Karma puts you in the ballpark for your FICO monitoring, but be aware it is not the actual FICO score that will be reported, as Credit Karma is an educated estimate, but it gives you a starting base to look at. Mint has a dual personality, if you will. It is great as a budgeting app as well as a credit monitoring tool. Academy Bank is another great service. If you're having problems opening a bank account, Academy Bank has your 6. They do not pull a credit history, and they allow you to set up a secured line of credit. Then Academy will report the line of credit each month to all 3 credit bureaus. This reporting can increase your FICO score as long as you keep that credit under control and you consistently pay it off each month. If you have a credit line of $300 and you want to set up auto payments, you will set up for every pay period a portion of that to pay down that debt. Credit cards such as Discover will provide some of your credit reports as well, and your FICO score. Again, it's just in the ballpark. More and more credit card companies are offering this kind of service. Keep in mind, for any line of credit, you want to keep those charges below 1/3 of your credit line. If you have a $300 credit line, you don't want to charge more than $100 and have that roll over to the next month. You want to keep it down below 1/3 because as you do that, your FICO score will increase. USPS, the United States Postal Service, has a fantastic app. Some of my clients have been using this to identify what's coming in the mail ahead of time. This way, they know what's coming at the end of the day and how to deal with that. They also can see if they were supposed to receive a piece of mail and it didn't show up. So by looking at it early on, they can look at their spending for that day and make sure that they're going to have enough money in their bank account for that payment to be had. We discussed Mint earlier, but to recap, Mint provides a credit monitoring service and budgeting. Google Sheets is a great way to budget. And there's an example that you can download from this presentation. Good Budget is a free to a point, meaning that you can use this particular app for some basic stuff, but then they want to charge you an add-on to it. Zetta is another application for couples budgeting. The number one reason couples fight is over finances. So Zetta allows you to sit down and do budgeting together. You can't just walk away and say, hey, I just can't deal with this. Do whatever you want. It matters not to me. You don't want to do that. You want to be involved in your finances and understand what's going on as a couple, because you have to make those decisions together and you have to be in the game of life together in order to make it work. You don't want to put that burden on just one person. Here are some tips for picking an app. Do not pay for any application before trying it. If they don't allow you to try it before you buy it, just walk away. There's plenty of other apps that are out there. Try a different app and see which one works for you. Apps or applications are very personal in nature. There are certain applications that I absolutely love, but my colleagues don't feel the same way. So look at what works for you and stick with that one, because it's all about forming better financial habits to get your financial life under control. Don't be afraid to switch an app. If it doesn't meet your needs, get rid of it and try something new. Don't give up. Any steps you take to control your budget and credit should be seen in a positive light. You did not get into your current situation overnight, and you will not get out overnight. Remember, every journey begins with the first step.
Military Matters volunteer attorney Michael Rapp will cover a relevant topic many people fall victim to: identity theft. He will teach you how to prevent identity theft and use credit reports to your benefit. Michael is an attorney with Steckline & Rapp. Since graduating law school, Michael has focused his practice exclusively on consumer law. Michael regularly gives talks around the Kansas City area on the topics of debt and credit. Prior to attending law school, Michael served his country, was decorated, and honorably discharged from the United States Air Force.
I was active duty Air Force and deployed in support of Operations Iraqi Freedom and Enduring Freedom, and therefore had the luxury of deploying a few times to both Iraq and Afghanistan. Later, I went to law school, and now I'm an attorney at Steckline & Rapp. Our firm's focus is on consumer protection, but primarily it's on financial reputation. A lot of what I do centers around background checks and credit reports. Today, I'm going to hone in on something that I see a lot of: identity theft, preventing it, and what to do if it happens. Before we start, let me talk a little bit about a credit score. When people think of a credit score, they think of a FICO score. FICO is not the only one out there, it's just the one used most by lenders. Credit scores are determined by proprietary algorithms. They have their own secret sauce for how they're making the score, but the FICO score is made up roughly of uneven percentages: making your payments on time, how much credit you have and how much you use, how long you've had credit, trying to get new forms of credit, and the different types of credit that you have. It's almost counterintuitive that they don't care how much money you make. They're not looking at how much you've saved. They're only looking at whether or not you use credit and whether or not you're doing so in a way that's responsible. So even if your identity is compromised, at first, the thief could be making your credit look better. So your FICO score tanking or raising doesn't necessarily warn you that there's a problem. So now let's start with two important factors about identity theft. Number one, I don't really like the term. If someone steals my identity, they don't get to become me. For good or for bad, I'm still Michael Rapp and everything that comes with it. What they've done is use my identity to steal goods or services or money from someone else. It's a form of imposter fraud, but I guess that's not such a catchy term. The second thing is prevention. In a phrase that was made famous from Fight Club, on a long enough timeline, the survivability rate of everyone drops to 0. It's already a fact that there have been so many data breaches and our information is already out there. And more breaches are happening every day. Thinking that it's not going to happen to you, statistically, is increasingly unlikely. So this is really about recognizing when it happens and how to limit the harm and recover your good name as fast as possible. There is no doubt that identity theft is on the rise. There are a lot of factors making it an attractive crime. There's rising unemployment, there's ease of obtaining credit online, and the massive data breaches that exposed all of us to the criminal elements anywhere in the world with a computer. There are really two kinds of identity theft. Those that happen from strangers, dark forces on the dark internet that are going to steal your identity in order to take out loans with your good name. I think that's the one that most of us think about. But there's another one that I see more commonly, the one that happens from people that you know, whether it be from a spouse or an ex-spouse, or a parent, or a child, or a brother or a sister, or even a coworker. Whatever their motivations, the people that know you have a much easier time impersonating you than a stranger does. They have the inside track. So an ounce of prevention is a pound of cure. So what are we to do? You need a baseline. The first thing I suggest that everybody do is go to annualcreditreport.com. There's a law that requires anyone who compiles and sells your information to make it available to you once a year for free if you ask for it. That website allows you to get reports from Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax, the 3 largest national credit reporting agencies, at least once a year, sometimes much more often. The next one that I would suggest everyone look at is at least as important as the national NCRAs, is the largest company you may never have heard of, LexisNexis. This one you can order, but you can't get electronically. You can request it at consumer.risk.lexisnexis.com/request. And they snail mail you a copy. Between the NCRAs and LexisNexis, pretty much every report that exists out there is derived or compiled from the information that they have collected. Now, you have these 4 reports sitting in front of you. What are you looking for? What do you need to know? There's a lot of resources that exist out there that can help you with that. For starters, you want to check with the really simple stuff, the personal information. Do you recognize all the addresses on there as being yours? Not relatives, places you've actually lived, either in the past or are residing in currently. Do you see variations of your social security number? Is your birthday correct? Are there multiple variations or spellings of your name? All those things are not necessarily indications your identity has been compromised, but it does make things harder on you. The next thing you're going to want to look at is all the accounts that are on your credit report. They're ones that you've opened up. They're ones that you might be authorized user on. Ones that you've opened jointly with somebody else. Make sure you recognize every one of these and know that they belong to you. Assuming that you haven't already identified some serious problems, you do want to get a monitoring service in place. A free one, completely free, not something that's attached to something else that you already pay for, is not my favorite, but it may be better than nothing. Otherwise, there are lots of choices out there in the marketplace. Getting one of them is essential to knowing if stuff changes on your report, so that you don't have to do something like this every day. Lastly, if you do notice something, you can always write to whatever company that produced the report and tell them that you think they're wrong. My suggestion is to reach out and find somebody who does this regularly to help, but like filing your taxes, it's certainly something that you can do on your own. Just know that this area of the law has attorney's fees built into it. Just because you don't think that you can afford a lawyer or don't want to pay for one, doesn't mean there's not one out there willing to help you.
Military Matters volunteer attorney Jill Olson of the Olson Law Firm will provide important information about your rights as a debtor and what creditors can and cannot do. Jill practices in the areas of bankruptcy law, collection, foreclosure, and is a litigator in consumer, commercial, and bankruptcy law. She is a former law clerk for a judge with the Missouri Court of Appeals, Western District.
I have been a creditor's attorney for over 20 years. During that time, I have sued thousands of people like you who have unpaid debts. But I'm here to tell you some things you may not know and hopefully give you some tools and information to help handle things if you end up in a situation where you have to deal with a debt collector or an attorney. Just because you owe a debt does not mean that the creditor has the right to turn your life upside down. You have the right to remain in control. The primary law that protects debtors from creditors is called the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, or FDCPA for short. And this law has some powerful tools to protect you and to prevent a creditor or debt collector from bullying you. If a creditor or a debt collector calls you, they cannot harass or call you names. They cannot harass your family members. They cannot call before 8 a.m. or after 9 p.m. They cannot call if you are represented by an attorney. They cannot call if you tell them to cease and desist, and they cannot threaten you with being put in jail if you fail to pay. If a creditor or a debt collection agency sends you a letter regarding a debt that they allege you owe, you have the right to dispute the debt. You also have the right under the FDCPA to demand that they cease all collection on the debt until they provide you with specific information. This includes support for the amount claimed, proof that the debt is your debt, including copies of any documents they allege you signed, and the name and address of the original creditor. If the creditor or debt collector fails to respond to your dispute, the FDCPA allows you to sue them for violating the law. Now, if you live in Missouri and you are behind on your house payment, the mortgage company may not take your home without first following certain rules. First, they are required under Missouri law to send you a notice of default and right to cure, giving you the amount necessary to bring the account current and a due date. If you do not pay the amount owed by the due date, the mortgage company will then request a trustee sell the property at auction. The trustee is required to mail a notice to you 30 days or more before the sale. The trustee is also required to publish notice of the foreclosure sale in a local newspaper, either for 20 straight days or once a week for 4 weeks, depending on the county. Now, this notice will state the date, time, and place of the sale. The trustee will then auction the property on the date and time indicated. Before the property is sold, you have the right to bring the account current, dispute the amount due and owing with the trustee and the mortgage company, or file a Chapter 13 bankruptcy to stop the sale. Now, if you're behind on a car loan, a lender cannot repossess your vehicle without taking certain steps. If you are 10 days late in making your payment, a lender must send you a notice of default and right to cure. Again, you have the right to bring the account current within 20 days. If you do that, then they cannot repossess the car. But you're only entitled to 2 of these notices over the life of the loan. So if you default twice and cure twice, and then you default a third time, they are not required to send you a notice. They can just come get your car. Also, a lender is only legally required to send the notices to the last address that you provided to them, either in writing or on the phone. So if you do not keep your lender informed of your current address, you are only hurting yourself, because you are not going to get the legally required notices. Now, if the lender repossesses the vehicle because you failed to cure the default, they have to send you a notice of plan to sell property. This notice gives you another 20 days to bring the account fully current and regain possession of your car. If a creditor sues you and you have to go to court, you have the right to ask for evidence as to why you owe the debt. This request must be in writing and mailed to the attorney for the creditor. You will also need to file a notice with the court that you made this request. My best advice if you are sued is to hire an attorney. You may think that you can't afford one, but you are at an extreme disadvantage if you try to represent yourself. Now, if you lose at trial and you are being garnished on the judgment, you have a right to claim certain exemptions to shield your assets from creditors. In Missouri, if you have children under the age of 21 living with you whom you support, you can file an exemption and claim head of household. This reduces the amount that can be garnished from 25% to 10%. If you lose at trial or you agree to make payments and you can't pay anymore, you have the right to file bankruptcy and possibly eliminate all or most of your debt. For a free guide on surviving debt, go to the National Consumer Law Centers at www.nclc.org. There you will find consumer education brochures, consumer debt advice, and a book on surviving debt. If you believe that a lender or a debt collector has violated your rights, you can visit the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau website at www.consumerfinance.gov and submit a complaint, ask questions, or seek additional information about how to protect yourself financially. I hope that you are never in this situation, but if you are, I hope that the information I've provided is helpful to you.
In this session, Military Matters volunteer attorney Rachel Foley of Foley Law KC Bankruptcy will go over the different bankruptcy chapters available to individuals and how to recognize if bankruptcy is the right choice for you. Bankruptcies can be confusing and overwhelming. Our goal is to make bankruptcies more transparent and easy to understand so that you can make the right decision for you and your future.
Some people really want to pay their debt and come to the Chapter 13 to do that. Chapter 13 is the ultimate debt consolidation company. It charges 0% on that debt, so each payment you make each month goes to the principal. Student loan debt. If you have a student loan and you're behind and you can't get an income-based repayment plan and you can't get a forbearance on the debt that's due, then a Chapter 13 will be a great place for you. The reason being is you can segregate the student loans into a separate classification and pay that debt through the Chapter 13 plan. Bankruptcy may allow you to seek a discharge of all your student loans, but you have to file a special lawsuit and you have to prove that if you were paying these student loans, you couldn't live day to day. If you are a veteran and you were deemed to be disabled, your student loans at the federal end of those loans should be discharged. So you want to speak to somebody about that. Another reason to be in a Chapter 13 are reverse mortgages. So in a reverse mortgage, you are responsible for the taxes and insurance. And if you don't make those payments, the mortgage company will make those payments for you. But you're going to have to pay the piper at some point. So if you are 5 years behind on those taxes and insurance payments, the reverse mortgage company can begin a foreclosure process. When you file a Chapter 13, that stops everything in its tracks. And now you have 5 years to pay that debt and get back on board. Bankruptcy can actually help you with a security clearance. Owing debt may prohibit you from advancing in your career, just because the FICO score can pull your security clearance down. But what happens in the bankruptcy? The bankruptcy in a Chapter 7 or 13 will eliminate that threat because you're going to discharge all debt that's dischargeable, except for child support, student loans, and taxes. So be aware that you can increase your security clearance through a bankruptcy filing. Lawsuits, garnishments, and judgment liens. Oh my! Filing either a Chapter 7 or 13 will generally stop a lawsuit and garnishment through what's called the automatic stay. The exception to this proceeding is any action including domestic abuse, child support, criminal actions, and a few other specific instances. Judgment liens are a critical issue for those attempting to purchase or refinance a home. Mortgage companies, as well as title companies, will attempt to refuse a loan or refinancing if the client has a judgment lien, either in associate or circuit court. Lenders believe the debt is a judgment lien regardless if it does not meet the requirements of an actual judgment lien pursuant to Missouri statutes. As long as the suit was filed and the judge issued an order, they consider it a judgment lien. But some judgments, if they're older than 10 years old, they are presumed to be paid. Are you behind on a home? A Chapter 13 will allow you 60 months to bring that account current and stop a foreclosure in its tracks. A Chapter 13 also allows homeowners several possibilities to save their home from foreclosure. In Missouri, the Chapter 13 will actually force the mortgage company to restart the foreclosure process, and this will buy the time for the homeowner to work on a resolution, even if the Chapter 13 fails. In Kansas, the process is a little different. The Chapter 13 will still stop the foreclosure process, but you have to be careful because if your bankruptcy tanks and you get kicked out for one reason or another, the lawsuit in Kansas will pick up where they left off. So be aware of that. In a Chapter 13, you may be able to strip off or remove the subsequent mortgages. If the value of the home does not exceed the balance of the primary mortgage, you may be able to file a lawsuit to request that the second, third, fourth, or judgment liens be removed from your home. The removal of the lien can then be recorded upon the completion of the plan or the Chapter 13 bankruptcy, and any remaining debt associated with the subsequent mortgages are discharged. They're gone. Additionally, lenders appear to be more receptive to considering a loan modification or principal forgiveness once you file a Chapter 13. In a Chapter 13, there appears to be no limit as to how many times one may apply for a loan modification. I have one client who has applied 6 times and has finally received an offer that he is willing to take. Vehicles. If you're behind on a vehicle payment and/or you need to lower the payment by extending the time to pay or reducing the interest rate, Chapter 13 may be the best way for you. A Chapter 13 will allow you up to 60 months to pay off that vehicle loan. This may also allow for the reduction of the ongoing payment of the vehicle if this is your second or third year of being in the payment plan. A Chapter 13 allows one the possibility of reducing the interest rate if it is higher than the current what's called a trustee interest rate. Generally, we can cram it down to about 3 to 5%. In a Chapter 7, you might be able to reduce the loan on your vehicle by doing what's called a redemption for the current value of your vehicle. But you must obtain a lender that will issue the loan at a reasonable interest rate. The other advantage of a Chapter 13, as it stands today, you may be able to surrender the vehicle at any time in a Chapter 13. So at the beginning of your case, if you're not eligible to purchase anything because of your FICO score, you can drive the vehicle that you have, and then once your FICO score comes up, you can surrender that vehicle and then purchase a new vehicle. As with all things in the law, this is subject to change. Let's say that you've had a repossession. If your car has been repossessed, a Chapter 13 will stop that repossession cold and allow 5 years, again 60 months, to pay off that vehicle. So you need to talk to an attorney straight away. If your car has been repossessed, you want to get that bankruptcy on file within 10 days. Let's say that you budgeted for a new vehicle, but you didn't budget in the sales tax, which is not uncommon. You can file a Chapter 13 and pay that sales tax over 60 months. This will allow you to obtain tags for your vehicle and get it legal. So if you're behind on paying a sales tax and you've just purchased a new vehicle, talk to somebody about a Chapter 13. Let's say that you're behind on your taxes and that the IRS is coming after you. A Chapter 13 will put a pause button in that collection activity. So once you get into bankruptcy at Chapter 13, you will again have 60 months to pay that debt. And some of that tax debt may be dischargeable, meaning you don't have to pay for it. But you need to talk to an attorney and make sure that your tax debt qualifies, or at least get into the 13 and have 5 years to pay that debt. In a Chapter 13, the penalties and interest on priority tax debt stops accruing. This can be a huge advantage to you to pay off this debt. Tax liens in a Chapter 13 are valued as of the date of filing and may be paid through the plan. This will allow you to obtain a release of that lien upon the entry of the discharge. The value of that lien that must be paid through the plan is the present value of the equity in your home, and that is what attaches to the lien. So keep in mind, if you do not have any equity in that home, as we talked about earlier, stripping off a lien, this may be a perfect situation that the tax lien does not attach, and we can pull off that lien. If you and your spouse are on the house in Missouri, it's called joint tenancy by the entirety. And what this means is that if you have a tax lien that only attaches to your spouse and the other spouse is not attached to this tax lien, you might be able to strip that tax lien off only through a Chapter 13. So if this is your case, make sure to speak to a bankruptcy attorney and evaluate where you're at. After the bankruptcy discharge, the pre-filing lien does not attach to any newly acquired property, meaning that if you purchase a home in the future, it is not going to attach to it. Bankruptcy can be seen as a beginning or an ending. It's all up to you. The first thing you want to do is speak to an attorney. Lay out all the facts and information of what's going on, and then tell yourself, I'm taking my first step to financial freedom.
Thank you to our Military Matters volunteer attorneys who shared their knowledge with us: Rachel Foley, Jill Olson, Michael Rapp, and Joanne Stutz. They represent a fraction of the generous legal community within the Kansas City Metropolitan area who volunteer their time with Military Matters every year. They are committed to assisting veterans and service members, and we are grateful for their consistent support to these deserving individuals. We hope you learned how to build better credit, how to follow a budget, and how to be consistently financially stable in order to avoid foreclosure or bankruptcy. Please visit our website, militarymatterskc.org, for more information about Military Matters. Thanks, and be well.